In this video, I'm going to tell you 5 times Donald Trump showed that he has no understanding of basic science and no interest in learning about it. His only interest in science comes from a profit or show of strength motive. Can I sell it or can I shoot people with it? Preferably both, probably. Ominous weapons indeed.
Donald Trump doesn't understand diffusion.
Donald Trump said this to coal miners. You mean to tell me, so if I take hairspray and if I spray it in my apartment, which is all sealed, you're telling me that affects the ozone layer? In school science, we teach diffusion to pupils aged 11 onwards. Yes, the gases in hairspray and other spray cans, and at some time in refrigerators when the propellant was made from CFCs, otherwise known as chlorofluorocarbons, did indeed diffuse into the atmosphere. As a result of the UV radiation from the sun, a chain of chemical reactions was set in motion, which had an effect of destroying an amount of ozone. Eventually, they also get removed from the atmosphere, but this takes a long time, and it takes equally long for the effects to disappear, since both the ascent and the removal of the chlorine depend on diffusion to some extent. What Donald Trump makes here is an argument from personal incredulity. Because he can't understand, he thinks it can't be true. Would he have supported the Montreal Protocol in 1987 as president? He might have been the single cause for the depletion of the ozone layer had he been president then. Which liberal PC snowflake, who bent to international scientific consensus on this, agreed to this liberal agenda to destroy the US economy? Ronald Reagan. This also shows that he doesn't understand particle theory, collision theory, and probably anything to do with chemical equations. I will illustrate the last point with...
Donald Trump doesn't understand atomic theory.
Donald Trump has asked the question whether a flu shot would help against the current coronavirus pandemic. The answer was, of course, a resounding no, since vaccines are very specific. In general, they can bestow immunity against one disease-causing pathogen only. This is why the flu shot has to be worked on constantly. In essence, scientists make predictions and have a guess as to how it mutates. As the flu virus mutates, with each mutation, it is potentially not recognized as the original pathogen. Sometimes flu shots turn out to be less good than at other times, but that is the only time you can even potentially make a vaccine against an unknown pathogen. Trump then doubled down and asked whether if a really strong, solid shot was given, it might not help. Again, the answer was, of course, no. More of something that doesn't help doesn't suddenly help it working. Analogously, if someone doesn't understand what you are saying, shouting it doesn't help either. But at its heart here, I think that Trump doesn't understand the atomic nature of matter. Matter is atoms arranged in space in a certain way. In molecules, the shape is extremely important for living things, since small differences can make a huge difference. For example, and I taught this to 15-year-olds, esters have different smells depending on how many carbon atoms they have in a chain, either side of the ester bond. One extra carbon can make the difference between smelling of pear or banana. I would bet a large amount of money that Donald Trump thinks that the chemical name is just what you print on the outside, because, all pills look similar. In the same way, he doesn't understand that pathogens look different to the immune system, and a small change can render a pre-existing response null and void to fight it, which is why HIV, the virus which causes AIDS, is so difficult to treat. It actually is a virus which is terrible at making copies of itself. It makes a large number of copies which don't work or don't cause disease, but they are all different and all trigger an immune response, and the ones that do work continue multiplying. Evolution at its gruesome worst for humanity.
Donald Trump doesn't understand pathogens.
So, HIV.gov gives a summary of a recent talk by Trump about ending coronavirus, HIV, and hepatitis. I think it can be taken as fairly well understood that any president would take pleasure in being able to announce that, but this moment belongs to Donald Trump. So let's have a quick look. Well, thank you very much, and welcome to Dan O'Day, CEO of wned. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. You know what that is because it's been in the news, and the company has been in the news, and it's a great American company that's done incredible work on HIV and hepatitis C. And I hear that That's what's happening with hepatitis is a great medical story. Really a great medical story. I've been hearing about that. It's fantastic. Dan. So, if you are familiar with Donald Trump's speaking style, hearing from many people is his way of backing up stuff. It is left to the audience to figure out what or who he means. In this intro, he doesn't say anything of value. I am pleased to announce that Gilead now has an EUA from the FDA for remdesivir. And you know what that is because that's been the hot thing also in the papers and in the media for the last little while. An important treatment for hospitalized coronavirus patients. And it's something I spoke with Dr. Hahn and Dr. Fauci. I spoke with Deborah about it. And it's really a very promising situation. So, an EUA is an emergency use authorization. It basically says that remdesivir is an investigational drug and is known to inhibit viral RNA synthesis. It also has side effects, and these are outweighed by the potential benefits to patients with severe COVID-19. It isn't difficult. This letter, which is openly available, has some easy sentences which Trump could have referenced. What does he reference? The papers. Firstly, are those the same papers you don't believe because they are fake news? Also papers? Really? There's also a nice bit of misogyny here. Dr. Birx doesn't get a title, while Dr. Stephen Hahn and Dr. Anthony Fauci do. Anyway, so how does this show he doesn't understand pathogens? Coronaviruses have been around for a long while, and remdesivir was developed in response to and modeled in scenarios with SARS in 2002-2003 and MERS 2012. H1N1, the famous swine flu, is actually now covered by the flu vaccine. So remdesivir has been in development for about 20 years at least. Hardly a new development kicked off under Donald Trump, and hardly a cure. It's another unproven treatment of last resort, albeit one that has more promise than injecting bleach or irradiating your body with UV light. And here we come to another thing Donald Trump does not understand.
Donald Trump doesn't understand the EM spectrum.
Donald Trump suggested using bleach as a treatment for coronavirus. 11-year-olds are taught in their first week that any substance with a harmful sticker should be treated with utmost care. The problem is that if it attacks bacteria, fungi, and the proteins around viruses, it also attacks the cells which are considered to be a healthy, necessary part of an organism. Bleach doesn't kill intelligently. It is a kill-all approach to hygiene. Claims on bleaches which claim that they kill 99% of all known bacteria are notable for one thing. Firstly, the 99% is a safety net, so they don't have to prove their claim if a bacterium slips through the net and causes disease, but wasn't killed by the bleach. And secondly, out of the 99% it does kill, 98.999% were absolutely harmless to human beings in the first place. While almost every surface in the world is covered in bacteria, it isn't covered in pathogens. Your guts are full of E. coli and your skin covered in Staphylococcus aureus. Some varieties of E. coli can cause food poisoning, and some Staph aureus can cause septicemia, but not all of them do, otherwise we would be in trouble. Well, more trouble than we are right now. But I'm not even going to count that. Donald Trump doesn't know about the uses and dangers of UV light. He also doesn't know about the ozone layer as discussed. That doesn't surprise me. I wonder whether he knows why he's supposed to put on sunscreen. Anyway, UV light causes some molecules to break at different points, such as DNA. If the damage is severe enough, this kills the cell. At worst, you get a mutation which turns into cancer. Simplified, yes, but my 15-year-olds know about this. It can be demonstrated with pictures of sunburn and UV exposure meters and stickers. The science is simple and should be understood by the average adult. The other side of the blue or violet part of the visible spectrum, the rule is that the higher the frequency, the higher the energy. The more dangerous the radiation is to the integrity of molecules. UV radiation, like bleach, doesn't distinguish between so-called good microorganisms or healthy cells and pathogens. A silly idea from a scientifically illiterate mind.
Donald Trump doesn't understand how science works.
Here the president is not alone. When the going gets tough, many people are looking to science and scientists to provide quick fixes, ignoring the fact that it can take months or years to develop a drug or safe vaccine. Donald Trump speaks about science as if it just happens, like many other people. In fact, It is work done by people who are often not brilliantly paid and on short-term contracts. Much of what happens in the private sector is not geared toward public health, but towards selling yet another form of the same product in different packaging. I won't go into a deep dive here, but just consider this. The number of private companies working on antibiotics is relatively small, partly because supply and demand economics are harmful to the efficacy of antibiotic treatments. Private companies want to sell as many units as they can of whatever they are making. However, if a new family of antibiotics were to be discovered, public interest would dictate to use it as sparingly as possible. Widespread use, as I discussed elsewhere, means that antibiotics lose their potency. Back to Trump and how science works. Scientific progress isn't inevitable. It depends very much on the commitment of a society to spend resources on supporting it. So let's have a look at how Donald Trump has done since he took office. So what sort of lefty PC snowflake published this article? ScienceMag.org, which is a publication branch of the AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science. This budget request was made in early 2020, and it details the request for money to spend on research. Research is the stuff that gets you new knowledge, which includes paradigm shifts. God, I hate this expression, but here it's true because science. So, who does he want to receive less than last year? The National Institutes of Health, 7%, the National Science Foundation, 6%, Department of Energy's Office of Science, 17%, the U.S. Agriculture's Agricultural Research Service, 12%, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, 19%, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, 31%, the Environmental Protection Agency, 37%, Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology, 15%, the U.S. Geological Survey, 30%. His budget request would also eliminate the Department of Energy's Advanced Research Projects Agency, Energy. But there must be one gleaming beacon in his request, and that is NASA. He created the Space Force. He said that space exploration is really important. He took time out from golf and watching Fox News to attend the SpaceX launch. So what does he intend, at least financially, for NASA? NASA Science gets 11% less for their science budget, essentially ending their education outreach program. And this underpins Donald Trump's attitude. Scientists aren't needed for science. It just happens. He also wants agencies to focus on AI, artificial intelligence, and automated manufacturing. So how come NASA are still thinking about space exploration? That's because Congress has rejected Trump's budget requests and have instead increased or kept the spending the same. But that doesn't stop Trump from taking credit, of course. My pupils understood by age 15 that although science discoveries can be accidental, such as penicillin by Dr. Alexander Fleming, they still have to happen within a scientific setting. Some discoveries are groundbreaking and lead to better questions, and some discoveries are disappointing because they yield the predicted answers, for example in particle physics. While it is exciting to have a suspicion confirmed, it is also preemptive. It doesn't necessarily lead to somewhere new. Imagine that you knew how every meal turned out that you cooked. You could predict its taste, texture, and flavor. The novelty wouldn't be there of accidentally creating something even more amazing. So here we have a person who is in charge of the world's foremost scientific community's budget, and he ignores the science they offer because he doesn't understand it. And therefore it can't be true, such as climate change and everything that points to renewable energies. If I was a cynic, I would think that it's because of the Green New Deal that the Democrats are suggesting. He also doesn't understand that science doesn't take sides, and it is not an automatic thing that just happens without people doing it. With resources he wants to cut. Then again, his administration is uniquely against any sort of education happening. Just look at his education secretary, Betsy DeVos, who is proposing cuts to her own department. Her logic appears to be that less money spent will result in better attainment. Meanwhile, US expenditure is relatively high, but like many places, teachers are distrusted and talked down constantly. Anyway, attacking the teaching profession doesn't yield increases in student performance? Who would have thought? Inspiring the next generation doesn't seem to be high on the agenda for Donald Trump. Shame. See you soon in another video. Bye.